Now, innovation, as we've seen, is all about creating value from ideas. Great. However, just planning to do it may not be enough. After all, as John Lennon famously said, life is what happens while you're busy making plans. It was perhaps expressed a little more punchily, if you'll pardon that expression, by Mike Tyson, the boxer, who basically said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Both of them are trying to say something that we know very well, and for me was rather nicely summed up by the Scottish poet Robert Burns. And Robert Burns has a very famous poem, one line of which says, "The best laid plans o' mice and men, they oft times gang agley," which roughly translated is, the best laid plans of mice or men will often go astray. They'll essentially go off track. That's what happens. Life, and particularly innovation life, is all about uncertainty. So, what we need to deal with this is, first of all, an entrepreneurial mindset, which is prepared to persevere in the face of surprising obstacles. We've got to be tolerant of ambiguity. It could be this, it might be that, maybe we could go around here. So we've got to have that kind of flexibility. Certainly we need creativity to see new ways out of old traps. And in various other ways, we need a skill set which is not a straightforward set of plans we want to get from here to there in these stages, but rather something a little more flexible that starts from where we are, not where we'd like to be, but where we are, and gets us where we're trying to go with relevant changes in direction as circumstances change. Now, this approach to being an entrepreneur has a name. It's a wonderful name called Effectuation. Effectu what? Well, effectuation is a theory, a very useful theory in entrepreneurship, and it was originally developed by this lady, Saras Sarasvaty. She was studying entrepreneurs and their ventures, successes and failures, during the early part of this century, working at the University of Virginia in the United States. And she distilled her findings into an approach, effectuation, which essentially says that entrepreneurs take a much more flexible view and they adapt themselves and their journey with circumstances, building on what they know. And there are really 5 key elements to this approach, this theory of effectuation. 5 core principles which are basically things that entrepreneurs might like to keep in mind as they try and negotiate the journey. The first of these, the bird in the hand principle. You know the proverb, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Well, entrepreneurs need to think about starting with what they've got, what they know, who they know, what they're passionate about, all the things that they've got which they could then deploy. No sense of saying, I want to change the world and do this or that, all assuming I could be over there. Start with what you've got, the bird in hand principle. The second is the affordable loss principle. Now, what's going on here is that inevitably it's a risky business, life is uncertain, and you've only got limited resources. Money, time, energy, passion, the time and skills of your friends, whatever, it's limited. So what you really don't want to do is to gamble it all on one big jump. It's more a case of step by step trying things out, only investing what we could afford to lose, limiting the risk as we go forward. The third key principle in effectuation, the lemonade principle. You know that phrase, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So, in a sense, given that we know life is uncertain and that whatever we do with our journey won't go according to plan, embrace the surprises. Try and turn them into opportunities rather than seeing them as obstacles or threats. That's the lemonade principle, and it plays out in many different contexts. Think, for example, in the humanitarian sector, one of the challenges with innovating when there's a crisis, a natural or a man-made disaster, is trying to solve a problem where the traditional way may be blocked and where we've got to think out of the box around there. Turn the crisis to advantage. The fourth principle is the crazy quilt principle. Essentially, think of one of those lovely patchwork quilts, stitching together squares of different fabrics and colours to make a quilt. Well, that's the idea. It's about putting together what you've got with what you can get hold of, what comes to hand, what you can negotiate and build up. So it's essentially stitching together a network of possibilities, particularly building partnerships and co-creating with others who are trying to get to the same place. It's a principle sometimes called bricolage, from the French word, which is essentially creating something by putting together all sorts of different bits and pieces. The last piece of the puzzle, the last principle in effectuation, is the pilot in the plane principle. Basically, you take off in an aeroplane and you're trying to get somewhere and land. I took my pilot's license, and it's rarely as simple as that. Yes, of course, you have to file a flight plan. You have to say, looking at your chart, where you're trying to get to and how long it will take and have you got enough fuel. That's your plan. But as soon as you're up in the air, all sorts of things change. The weather is a big force. You might take off on a beautiful sunny day and then the wind or the thunderstorm or something else comes in and you have to change direction. Maybe the king is flying through with his special aeroplane and as a result the air corridor around that flight is blocked, so we have to go around it. All sorts of things happen. Essentially, the pilot in the plane principle is all about taking adaptations to your course as you're in the course, in-course correction. You know what GPS often says to you if you go off the road? Off-road or off-route, recalculating. And it's essentially updating what it knows, where you are, and providing an alternate. That's the pilot in the plane principle, and of course it speaks very much to entrepreneurship, where we need to pivot on our way to where we're trying to get to. So, 5 key principles which underline the kind of mindset and skills we need to develop to be effective entrepreneurs. Effectuation.